There's a guy over here who's been jumping up for a while.
Right, next question at the back.
Yeah.
The GST will start in April next year. How do you account for the 500,000 turnover? They say is that starting from the 1st January 2015 until end of December, or starting from 1st April 2015 until 31st March 2016. The reason is.
Okay. All right, with your threshold calculation, right?
Yes.
If you're over 500,000 in a 12-month period now, it's very easy. Okay? What was last year's turnover in 2013? 600,000. I've got to register. Last year's turnover was 400,000. Do I have to register? What you've got to do is look 12 months ahead from today and say, in 12 months' time, do I think I'll be over the 500,000 threshold? Yes. I need to register now. Okay, so it is a prospective and a historical calculation. Historical is easy. If I'm over in my, for example, 2013 tax year, I register. But prospectively, you've got to think how your business will be going forward. So in the situation, for example, that your business has a 400,000 turnover, I would probably voluntarily register if I was dealing with other businesses. Because if you're one of my suppliers, I will tell you, I want you registered. Some businesses will not deal with anybody who is not registered. All right, they'll say, look, sorry, you do me a good service, you give me a good price, I'm not dealing with you anymore, you're too much trouble. All right, so for businesses that are close to the threshold amount, they should register. But you've got to look forward and estimate what your turnover will be.
They say if my turnover is above 500,000 this year, and then I plan to wind down, and starting 1st of April 2015 and until the following year,
yeah,
my turnover is less than 500,000.
Your theory is that you have a liability to register now. All right. If your business gradually winds down, then you apply for deregistration. But if you've got the liability to register now, you have to register now. So if your historical records say over 500,000, you're mandatory required to register. Okay. No option. You can deregister at a later date. Yes, if you want to retire. All right, sell your business to someone and retire to Langkawi or something. Yes, you can do that. And you can deregister.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Another question at the back.
Sorry.
Hi, good morning. I want to ask in the consumer standpoint, right? How would this GST affects the consumer's behavior? You know, in my opinion, that would it be as a consumer, I would want to buy more things ahead before the GST? Yeah.
Probably I'll have to answer that from an Australian perspective because I don't know enough about the Malaysian economy as a consumer to give you an answer. Certainly in Australia, purchasing patterns changed before and after GST, immediately before and immediately after. They then went back to normal after a month or two. But some people in Australia had sales in the month before, so that was June 2000, right? Because they knew come the 1st of July 2000, their products would be subject to GST and they weren't subject to sales tax before. So arguably my cost of supply to my consumer is going to go up, so I'll have a big sale beforehand. Other people, depending on whether they had a 20% sales tax rate before, going to a 10% GST, well, sales aren't going to change much at all. Certainly one industry that was impacted was the building and construction industry, because new houses had no sales tax on them. They had 10% GST. So that was eased by the government introducing a first homeowners scheme. So they gave homeowners some money to compensate them for the extra GST. So there's all sort of mechanisms, but yes, there can be different purchasing patterns before and after for different types of goods.
Another question at the back.
Good morning. I have two scenarios here. First one is that if I involve in agriculture and all my hardware, those building structure, everything, but when I sell my products, just like you say, the chicken, it cannot be imposed in the output tax, isn't it? 6%. But all my building material is included GST. Yep. So how should I claim back?
Okay.
Second scenario is that...
I'll answer that one first because I'll have forgotten by the time I answer that. Yeah, with your agricultural, primary producers we call them in Australia, all right? And they are paying on the inputs, so there's 6% there. In a lot of cases, on the outputs, as you say, no GST. So you're always in a position of claiming a refund from Malaysian Customs. Now, Malaysian Customs have adopted a rule similar to Australia that if you lodge your GST return electronically, they will pay you back within 14 working days. All right, so...
What do you mean, electronic?
You lodge your GST return on the computer with Customs, they'll get it back to you quicker, is the theory. You send them a piece of paper, it's going to take them longer. But yes, you can lodge and claim back on your inputs, what you buy, and you don't have to charge on your outputs if your product is zero rated. What's the second part of the equation?
The second is, we will face the competition in the market, especially commodity products. And you end out, some customer will not like to pay your 6%. Okay, what should we do then? Do we report to the customs that we don't sell or whatever?
Dealing with customers is a different issue. Yes, no, as an end consumer, no one, including myself, likes paying GST. But what usually happens is that they look for the pricing. Is one, this a good price for what I'm buying? Is it a good product for what I'm buying? Can I go around the corner and buy off some backyard guy at a cheaper price? Yes, you probably can. Is the backyard guy providing the same product, the same quality as this other guy is? Probably not. All right, so yes, that will ease over time. One thing you will find, certainly in Australia, was what we call the cash economy in Australia shrunk. All right, because of the reporting requirements, but it's still there. All right, and it will never be eliminated, but it will certainly be reduced. And in some cases, the revenue authorities visited the unregistered person to ensure that they weren't required to be registered. In a lot of cases, they were required to be registered and suffered penalties for not being registered when they're supposed to be and charging GST. Okay. If you're registered and your product's taxable, you're required to charge it. Yeah. As a registered taxpayer, you haven't got any option. If it's taxable, I've got to charge GST. All right? If it isn't a taxable product, so it's zero rated, you're not required. And you can claim your inputs. But yes, you will have competitors who will not be registered, who will be trying to avoid the GST. That's just, unfortunately, a fact of life in every country in the world. That happens. The authorities are vigilant enough, they should reduce it. They'll never eliminate it.
Gentleman in front.
Yeah, I'd like to know, sorry, what is the situation for individual renting out commercial premises and turnover less than 500,000? I was told something like even if your turnover is not over 500,000, it is advantageous to register because you can claim the input.
Yep. In business-to-business transactions, all right, so I'm renting you a premise, commercial premises. It is to my advantage to register if I'm under the 500,000 from the perspective of claiming your inputs. I then have to charge you 6%. If you're registered, you claim an input tax credit for the 6% I've charged you. All right, so certainly in the situation where it's advantageous to both parties, you'd consider registering. If the person to whom you're renting premises will not register for GST because they'll never make the 500,000, you charge them GST because you registered, because you're required to charge, but they can't claim it back. So it also depends on the people with whom you're dealing. Where both parties in the transaction are registered, there is no impact. when one party isn't registered, certainly there is an impact. All right?
A question from the lady here.
Yeah, hi, good morning. Hello. Yeah. Okay, just want to check, what happens if the company turnover is expected to be, let's say, above 500,000, but at the end of the year it is below 500,000? What happens to the GST charge to the customer? Do the company return it back, or does the...
No. Once you register, you charge and you remit the tax to the revenue authorities. All right? It's only when you contact the revenue authorities and say, look, my business, I'm going out of business, I'm retiring or whatever else, my turnover will gradually drop down, and they will say, okay, when it reaches this mark at this time, we will deregister you. Right? So they will, in consultation with the information that you provide them, determine the timeline when you deregister. But while you still register, if your product is taxable, +6. Okay?
Question over there.
Saya tak buat apa-apa. Sana.
Maybe I just not, I think I'm loud enough. Well, good morning. For commercial properties, we have to pay GST. Let's say when the developer sells to a buyer before GST was implemented, but the delivery is 2 years later. How does the GST come into it? Charge GST, or is it on the collection of keys?
Yeah. It's usually when title in the property passes, unless you get money beforehand. All right, so you're paid, and a lot of construction of commercial properties, they're progress billing. So if it's progress billing, it's 6% each progress billing. All right, so you can't wait till the end of the day and say, well, I've now got my million ringgit, so I owe you 6%. If you get 100,000 a month for 10 months, 6% on the 100,000 each month. So there's special rules for what they call time of supply for those things, but it's generally, if you got money, we want 6. That's customs attitude.
So if the buyer just pay cash upon, let's say, 1st of March, it's 1 month before they pay cash to the developer, then the 6% can be exempted?
With property, you'd hopefully be finished on the 1st of March, right? Because otherwise, customs will say, well, even though he's paid you, the shell of the building is only done, so it can't be his, so we'll have 6% anyway. All right, but there is a concession for property, and what it basically means is you get a valuation done as at 31 March 2015 and say out of this $1 million for this property, 600,000 of it is already there. So the balance, the 400,000 that's not there, would be subject to GST. Now, anybody who's in the situation of needing a valuation, I'd find someone now and sign them up now, because you'll find come next year that they'll be very popular and you might not be able to get anyone, and customs will say, well, we'll just have 6% on the lot. So the concession's there, use it.
Thank you.
Okay, one more last question from the gentleman in front.
Hi, good morning, Jeff. I'm from agriculture industry. So I was wondering whether flowers considered zero-rated supply.
I'm not very big on the flower industry, but I wouldn't think too many of them are edible. They may be. I wouldn't think they're basic food items, so not zero. I'm thinking very much 6%. As far as I know, there's nothing for the flower industry in the zero-rated category, but we realistically don't know till they release the list. I'd think not. Highly unlikely. 6%.
Reason being is flowers are perishable goods, so that means
yes,
we are not able to claim after that.
Your motor vehicle will perish too, but it's still taxable.
Oh dear. Sorry, and second questions would be, are we exempted from GST for transactions within our subsidiary companies?
Okay. There's a specific provision in the GST legislation which is worldwide basically, and what it says is if you register all the companies in your group and then you register them as a group for GST, the transactions between those companies are not subject to GST. All right? So they're disregarded, but transactions outside are taxable. Now, if you didn't opt or apply to get group registered, your transactions would be +6. So you have pieces of paper going between associated entities. One person's charging GST, the other person's claiming. So the provision is there to use to eliminate, for GST purposes, those transactions. Okay?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you everyone for your questions, and thank you, Jeff, for your sharing.